In a global information society, there is a constant race to deliver news first. Journalists on deadline never have enough time. Lack of time creates stress, which can cause compassion to fray. Going beyond first response when reporting on disaster, conflict, or other forms of human tragedy requires collaboration and consideration of cultural context and consequences. Situations like this brief hiatus in aerial bombing in El Salvador require speed to remain safe, but also limit the amount of interaction with the protagonist that the photographer can safely engage in. We were all in danger, and that created a momentary bond through fleeting eye contact, even when few words are spoken. Upon becoming aware of the camera, people often assent if they imagine that their image will create a bridge to a larger world, which might care to act if only they knew. However, consent and consequences cannot be taken for granted. Even when you must move quickly, or when respect demands an unintrusive presence, there must always be time to ask for permission. Emotional intimacy, rather than simple physical proximity, makes viscerally potent images possible. This is achieved when the available time and the camera are used as tools for compassionate interaction. As the Internet becomes the primary delivery platform for information, it renders all available news simultaneously global and local. This compounds time constraints and ethical challenges that reporters face. Balancing the public's right to know with the right to privacy and human dignity of those who are surviving conflict, disaster, or stigmatized conditions such as HIV require ongoing conversation among journalists, development professionals, psychologists, and social workers in collaboration with the affected communities. My work on the gang situation in Guatemala often took me to the morgue. The forensic examiners told me that I could photograph this young man's bullet-riddled body and face. If I were a forensic photographer, such grisly details of wounds might serve an evidentiary purpose. I thought about his mother and how she would feel if she confronted such an image in the newspaper and looked for a different perspective. When I tripped the shutter to make this photograph, it nearly provoked a riot. Had I not been with the victim's mother, who told the crowd she wanted me there, I would certainly have been run out of the cemetery or worse. The community was caught in battles among guerrilla groups, gangs, and paramilitaries for the control of Medellin. The mourners were extremely distrustful of the media. When terror grips a community suffering such violence, silence can form an impenetrable defensive armor. How does one responsibly report when danger still exists? One thing is critical. Whatever time you have must be invested in developing a collaborative relationship of trust. In projects dealing with survivors of trauma, I look for ways to reduce the potential for harm, engage in a collaborative relationship, and make the process as transparent and helpful to the protagonist as possible under whatever limitations I face. Nancy and 6 siblings survived one of Colombia's most brutal paramilitary massacres. She and her siblings walked up the hill, and we both noticed the effect of their shadows. "Let's hold hands to show we're united," she said. After hearing her story of survival on the streets, I asked Rosario, who had been raped by Guatemalan policemen, how she wanted to be photographed. She immediately embraced a lamppost. Her vulnerability in this eerily lit, abandoned street and her need for something solid to hold on to make a revealing portrait while obscuring her face. Carolina was shy about posing, and so I went away after the interview and watched from a distance. I caught this gesture as she begins parting her veil of hair, poised to reveal a former child soldier's longing for love and a normal teenager's life. As the project progressed, my thinking sharpened greatly through my conversations with UNICEF, and in particular with Communications Director Ellen Tolmie. Children, especially those who feel imprisoned by stigma, must have a context in which they can exercise control. 15-year-old Misrael asked me to take his picture behind the curtain as he spoke about his struggle with HIV-related illness. On assignment for UNICEF after Hurricane Stan, I traveled to Guatemalan villages where homes built with remittance dollars from Mayan workers in the U.S. had been reduced to rubble. I interviewed Fidel Lopez, who'd returned from California to find that he'd lost not only his home, but also his wife and daughters. 12-year-old Ezra Lopez, Fidel's only surviving child, stood by silently. Then he fished from his pocket the photos of his mother and sisters that his dad usually carried in his wallet. And he wept as he told me, "My mother was the best person. Without her, I don't know how my sadness will end." I can still feel him trembling as he hugged me after the interview ended. I handed him my pocket-sized point-and-shoot camera to make images until I had to leave. A current project documents families who have lost children, husbands, wives, mothers, or fathers to paramilitary violence in Colombia.